Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. So again, welcome to our online citizenship class. It's hard to believe we're now into week 10. So we're getting closer to the end of the class. Now, in this week, we're going to discuss the N400 sections 6 through 8. So I hope you had a chance to do a little bit of practice in the N400 last week. So hopefully you had a chance to fill out some information. So again, we're going to continue in the N400 application. But first, we're going to take a few minutes and practice with an important part of the interview, which is asking for clarification. Everyone, let's say that word together, clarification. Let's say that together. Ready?
Clarification.
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 Now, what does it mean to ask for clarification? What does that mean? Who can tell me? What does it mean to ask for clarification?
Ask about information.
Well, close, yes.
Ask about the details.
Okay, you're getting closer, yeah. Yeah, so when we ask for clarification, clarify comes from the word clear. So if you notice, they don't look exactly the same. But clarification means we want to ask because we don't understand something, and we want to make it clear to us. So again, during the interview, sometimes the interviewer will say something, and maybe we don't understand the information, so we have to ask to make it more clear. Right? So that's what clarification means, to make something clear. So again, the word clear is there, and it comes from the word clarify. So clarify means to make something clear. So that's what we're going to be practicing with here in these first few minutes, because sometimes during the interview, they're going to say something and we don't understand them. Now, what I want to tell everybody about that, okay, so everybody, we're going to relax, right? Because sometimes when they ask you a question, we get nervous, right? Do you get nervous sometimes if someone asks you a question and you don't understand it?
Yes.
Do we get nervous? Do you do this?
Not really nervous.
Do you do this? Gisela, do you chew on your fingernails? Like this?
Yeah.
No, you don't do that? Okay. Maybe you start to sweat, right? Maybe Saba, do you start to sweat if someone asks you something you don't understand?
Maybe sometimes.
Okay.
Especially if it is in English.
Of course. Well, that's the problem, right? The interview is in English. Well, first off, everybody, okay, so everybody, here's what I want you to do, okay? Now, everybody, look at the camera here. Look at me. So, everybody, we're going to breathe very deeply, and we're just going to go like this. Ready? So, everybody, watch me. And then we're going to release, okay? So, you want to try it together? Let's try it together. Ready? Okay, so ready? 1, 2, 3. Everybody breathe in. And breathe out. Oh, doesn't that feel good? Don't you feel better now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I want you to think about this is sometimes students get worried because in the interview, if the person says something they don't understand, they start to get really worried. And they think, oh, no, I'm not going to pass this interview. No, that's not true. What I'm here to tell you is don't get worried, because it's natural. Sometimes they're going to ask you something and you're not going to understand them. So that's what we're going to be doing here for the first part of our class, is to ask for clarification. Now, I know everybody in this class, maybe you've done this before. So here are 3 ways that we can ask for help, okay? Now, everybody, turn on your microphones. Let's practice these 3 together, okay? So everybody, microphones on. Are we ready? Okay, so guys, repeat after me. I'm sorry. Could you say that again? Everybody. I'm sorry.
Say it again.
Could you say that
again?
again? Okay. So that is the most common way to ask for clarification. Now, sometimes you could also say this. Could you repeat that, please? Everybody, let's try it. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Repeat that, please. Yeah. Now, here's my opinion. My opinion is if you say, could you repeat that? That sounds like you're in a classroom. That sounds like you're a student. I prefer the first one. I think the first one is more natural for English speakers, but that's okay. If you get nervous, maybe you forget, you could say, could you please repeat that? Now, but notice, please. Please is the important word there. As my mother would say, please is the magic word. Okay, so everybody remember that. All right, let's try the last one. Now, the last one is a little bit something that maybe you don't do, which is you take the word in question and you repeat it, but as a question. So, for example, maybe the person says a word like residence and you don't understand it. So you say it like this, residence. Okay, everybody try that. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Residence?
Yeah, do you see how my voice goes up like it's a question? So sometimes they will use a word in the conversation and you don't understand it. So you could say, for example, I'm sorry, residence. You could repeat the word. Okay. All right, guys, let's try these 3 again. Ready? Let's start at the first. Let's start at the top. Let's say it one more time. I'm sorry. Could you say that again?
Could you say
Honey?
again?
Let's try it again. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry. Could you say
Say
that
that again. Okay.
again?
Let's try the second one. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Could you repeat that,
Please.
Please.
Okay. And then the last one, let's say residence. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Residence?
Residence. Okay. Now, let's do a quick little practice conversation. Okay, so in this first conversation, Gisela, you're going to be the interviewer. Okay, and, oh, excuse me, guys. Sorry, let me turn that off there. Sorry. Okay, let's try this again. So, Gisela, you're going to be the interviewer, and Belisario, you're Mr. Saeed. Okay? Okay, so Gisela, you begin.
Now, Mr. Seed, who is your current employer?
I'm sorry. Could you say that again?
Where do you work right now?
I'm working in packaging.
Packaging.
Amazon.
Okay. Now, first off, thank you guys. Okay, so first off, if you notice, 2 things I want you to notice. The interviewer asks a question that maybe we don't understand. The words, maybe we don't know what current employer means. Okay, so when you ask the question, could you say that again? If you notice, let me use my little pen tool here. If you notice, the interviewer used different words. Did you see that? So often, yeah, so guys, even in everyday English, what I want you to think about is when somebody says something that you don't understand, maybe they will use different words to explain it. So again, current employer is the same thing as where do you work right now? So sometimes if we don't understand the words, the interviewer will hopefully use different words to explain. Okay. All right. So that's our first example. Okay. All right. Now let's go try the next example. So I'm going to turn this off. Okay. All right. Here's the next dialogue. Okay. Now Saba, you're the interviewer, and Olena, you are Ms. Kamai. Are we ready?
Okay. Are either of your parents U.S. citizens?
Could you repeat that, please?
Yes. Your mother and father, are they citizens of the United States?
No, they are not.
Okay. So once again, do you notice that they asked the question one way? So they mentioned parents, right? And then the interviewer changed the words to mother and father. So again, if you ask these questions for clarification, I'm sorry, or could you repeat that, then hopefully they will use different words, okay? Now, guys, we're practicing here because we don't want to ask too many questions, but sometimes if they ask you something you don't understand, it is okay to ask for help. It's okay to ask for clarification. All right, let's try one more, okay? All right, now this time, let's see. Everybody's just about done an example. So how about Elaine? How about you be the interviewer, okay? And Gisela, you be Ms. Gomez.
But that is a Miss. Okay, Miss
Gomez.
Gomez. Let's talk about your current
Residence.
residence.
Residence?
The place where you live right now.
Oh, yes. I live at Amelia.
Yeah, there you go. So again, notice in the interview, the person did not understand the word residence. So she says residence, like as a question, like I don't understand this word. So then the interviewer uses some different words, the place where you live right now. Okay. Now, guys, these three ways are very helpful when we don't understand something in the conversation. So that's why I think it's important for us to remember we can ask for clarification. We can ask for those things during the interview. Now, again, after class is finished here, I'll send you some videos that you can watch to practice, but this is something you can use in your everyday life. Okay, you can ask for clarification when you don't understand something. Okay.
Questions.
Okay. So, question.
John, can I say I beg your pardon?
You can. That sounds more British than American.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, sometimes if you say "I beg your pardon," it sounds like you're angry at the person. So be careful.
Really?
Yeah, sometimes if you say something and when somebody says "I beg your pardon," they might sound like they're offended, like you said something bad about them, and now they're going to fight you, right? So yeah, so again, to Americans, that sounds a little strong, like you said something wrong to the person.
But if I say I beg your pardon, please.
What I would recommend, like here, for example, in Cincinnati, for example, I am not from Cincinnati, guys, so I am not from this area. But for example, many people in Cincinnati, many generations, their great grandfathers and whatever were German. And in German, if someone asks you a question and you want them to say something again, they go bitte, and bitte means please. So sometimes I'm talking to somebody from Cincinnati, and if they want me to repeat something, they'll say, please. And I'll say, please what? I don't understand. Yeah, I don't understand. Yeah, so the problem is sometimes, Elaine, people use different words to ask for help or clarification. But remember, please sounds kind of like something we would say in Cincinnati. Maybe that's not something they say everywhere. So again, I might recommend if you want to use I beg your pardon, you could say pardon. You could just use the word pardon. Pardon?
Pardon?
Yeah, that would be okay, but that still sounds more British than American. Yeah.
Because I learned that it's British English.
Yes, and I know maybe other students have studied that, but if you said pardon, that sounds like you're not from the United. It sounds like you're speaking British English. So again, during the interview, if you say pardon, they'll understand you, Elaine. That's fine. But if you're talking to people on the street and they say something and you don't understand, if you say pardon, they might say, oh, this person doesn't speak American English. So to me, it sounds more British. Yeah. Yeah, but if you say I beg your pardon, that sounds to an American, that sounds like you're going to fight me. Like you said something, you said something offensive, and you're like, what? What did you say? I beg your pardon? Come on, let's go. And they start fighting.
So a tomato and tomato.
Well, wait a minute. Now you're talking about just different accent, different pronunciation. But in this case, so this is a good example for everybody to understand that, British English and American English, we do have some differences.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. But still, I would recommend that if you can't remember anything, you could just say, could you please repeat that? That's usually an easy way. But I think most Americans respond to, could you say that again?
Could you say that again?
Yeah, that's much more common for Americans. And it's understood when they say, could you say that again? Then an American understands that they should say it in a different way. Now, sometimes Americans have a bad habit of just repeating something louder. If you say, or louder and slower. So they might say something and they might say, what is your name? Like you can't hear. So sometimes Americans are bad about that. But if you say, could you say that again? Then they understand, oh, I need to choose different words. Okay. All right. That's a good question, Elaine, and it's always good to ask. Okay. All right. Well, before we go to the presentation, actually, let me go back for just a moment. Okay, everybody, let's try these, especially the first two. Let's try the first two one more time. Okay. So, guys, repeat after me. I'm sorry. Could you say that again, everybody?
I'm sorry. Could you say that again?
Very good. All right. And then try the second one. Could you repeat that, please, everybody?
Could you
Could you
repeat that?
repeat that,
Repeat that,
please?
please.
Good. So guys, practice that. Practice that. So even in your everyday life, practice that. Now, the last example with the word, that's not my favorite. When people just say the word residence, that to me is not a great way to do it, but if you need to, you can always just make the word a question. Okay. Okay. Well, let's continue, guys. So again, I think that's a great way for you to keep practicing. But now let's go ahead and jump into the application. So today we're going to be looking at the N400 sections 6 through 8. Now, the good news is that sections 6 through 8 are not very difficult, I think, for anybody to understand. So the good news is we won't be spending a long time in the application, because sometimes talking about the application can get a little hard to follow. But for example, in part 6, sorry, that went back. Okay, so first off, in part 6, you're starting with information about your parents. Now, again, if you notice, I've circled the introduction there, the title of part 6. So, for example, if neither parent is a citizen, okay, so for example, if anybody here in the class, if their mother or father are citizens, then you'll notice you'll have to fill out the rest of the information. But if it says here, if neither parent, so again, if neither one of your parents is a U.S. citizen, then you can just go ahead and go to part 7. Okay, so that might save us a little bit of time here. So in the class right now, does anybody have either parent who is a U.S. citizen? Okay.
For me, no.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. All right. So I'm taking that as a no. All right, so the good idea here then is basically if neither parent is a citizen, you don't have to answer part 6, okay? Now, in terms of information about parents, okay, just to be clear, you will answer no to questions 2 and 3. So again, if you answered no here and yes to your parents being married, yeah, but notice you can skip it. You don't even have to answer any of the questions here. So it just depends on if either parent is a citizen. So in this case, since neither parent is a citizen, we're going to skip ahead to part 7. Okay, so again, information about your parents, your father, that kind of information here. Okay? All right, so part 7. Part 7 is simply called the biometric section of the test. So basically, when you went to get to your biometric information with your permanent resident card, you probably already did something similar to this. Now, you don't have to share this information with us today, but here on this part of the test, it is kind of what we call the biographic background part. So, for example, let's go through each section just very quickly. So, for example, in number 1, it mentions our ethnicity. Now, notice ethnicity in this case would refer to if we're Latino or not. So in this case, I think we have 2 people in the group, right? Gisela and Belisario, where you would mark that you are Latino in terms of ethnicity, and then the rest of us would choose not. Okay, that seems fairly simple. And then for number 2, it mentions race. Now, again, race and ethnicity are often confused, even by Americans. So in this case, when they're referring to race, they're actually kind of confusing a little bit of ethnicity and race in the same group. So in this case, I'm not going to tell you how to answer this part of the application, but notice you have white, Asian, Black or African American, American Indian or Alaska Native, or Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. So again, you can choose how you identify yourself. But remember, if you identified on your permanent resident card, you need to identify the same way in the application. And notice it says, notice what it says, select all applicable boxes. So again, some people might see themselves as two different races or three, because maybe their parents were different races. So the idea here is you can choose how to answer that. Okay, now again, when it comes to height, everyone, let's say that word together, height. Can we say that word, height?
Height.
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 Okay, now this is one of those crazy words in English because when we talk to each other about this, we often don't use the word height. We ask how tall you are. So if you notice, that's a very frequent confusion for students. So for example, I'm putting in the chat box now the question, how tall are you? But notice when we use it on a form, we use the word height. Okay, and height, if you recognize it, comes from the word high. So what's funny is when we talk about buildings, we often say, how high is this building, right? Or maybe how tall. We could say how tall is the building. But if we're thinking about like flying in an airplane, notice we say how high the airplane is flying. We don't say how tall the airplane is flying. So this is one of those crazy words in English that can be confusing. Okay, so again, when we think about how tall you are, now I do want to practice with this. Now, if you notice in America, here in the United States, we don't use meters, right? Or we don't use centimeters or any of those measurements. We use feet and inches. So again, if you notice, when you have to put in the information, you have to put in feet and inches. Now, I do want to take a moment and ask somebody, tell me, do you know your height? How tall are you? Do you know in feet and inches? So Elaine, how would you answer this part?
5 and 1.5.
Oh, so you would say 5 feet. So repeat after me, Elaine. 5 feet,
5 feet,
1.5 inches.
1.5 inches.
Yeah, so that's how we say it. So like when you go to the doctor, you would say 5 feet, 1.5 inches. Okay? All right, Saba, do you know your height?
Yes, it's 5 feet and 3 inches.
Okay, good. All right.
You're very tall.
All right, what about you, Elena? Do you know your height?
I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Uh-oh. Okay, so this is where Google is going to help us here. Okay, so
I know in a meter.
okay, tell me in meters. How many meters?
1 meter, 55 centimeters.
Okay, so we're going to see here. Okay, so 1 meter, 55 centimeters. Okay, so we're going to convert now to feet. So, all right, so Elena, if you see the number on the screen there, it says you're 5 feet, basically 5 feet and almost 1 inch. Okay.
Almost 1 inch.
So you might just say, I think I would just say 5 feet. That's probably fine. So you might just put 5 feet, 0 inches. I think that's fine. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right, Gisela, what about you? How tall are you?
I'm exactly like Olina in 5 feet.
5 feet. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
maybe when we come back in person someday, we can put you next to each other and see if you're correct. All right. See if you're the same height. All right. Belisario, what about you? How tall are you, Belisario? Do you know?
Maybe 5.
So 5 feet.
1.5 inches.
Okay. Everybody's getting that half in there. I like that. 5 feet and 1.5. I like that. Okay. All right. So there you go, Belisario. Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. Now, for example, my height, some people, when I go to the doctor, sometimes I'm 5 feet, 11 inches, or sometimes I just say 6 feet because I'm pretty close to 6 feet. So in this case, again, this is not there. There's not a doctor there who's going to measure your height. But I wanted to talk about that for just a moment because here in the United States, we don't use meters and centimeters. So Elena, you're going to have to, make sure you've got your Google ready on your phone to convert. Okay, because if you use meters and kilometers and centimeters with Americans, they will look like this. They will not understand. Okay, so Please understand, they will not understand you. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk about the weight. Okay, everyone, let's say that word, weight.
Wait.
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 Okay, now don't worry, I'm not going to ask you your weight. You don't have to tell me. But again, notice here in the United States, we use pounds, right? So not grams or kilograms. So just remember, when you put your weight, you have to list your pounds, okay? Now, before we leave the question, you probably noticed that the word weight sounds exactly the same as weight, as in W-A-I-T. Okay, now I've talked about this before in another class. What do we call it when two words sound the same but have different meanings? Does anybody remember or know? What do we call that? Any guesses? Two words that sound the same but are different. Anybody know? Anybody?
Synonym? No.
Well, that's same meaning. Okay, so good guess.
Ah.
Good guess, Saba. Saba, I'll help you out. Here are the first few letters. H-O-M-O, homo.
Homo.
Homophone.
Congratulations.
Yeah, yeah.
There
Homophone.
you go.
Oh.
Yeah. So everyone, let's say that, homophone.
Homophone.
Yeah, so homophones are words that sound the same but are different words. So everyone, let's say that word again, weight. Weight.
Wait.
Wait.
Yeah. Okay, now, for example, before we leave the topic, just real quickly, can you give me one more example of a homophone? I'll give you a hint. Look at number 5 on the screen here. Look at number 5. Do you see it in number 5? Actually, there are 2. For example, I and I. Yeah, so my I, right, is one, and then I am Mr. John, right? Those are examples of homophones. Here's one more. Look at number 5. There's another one. One, right? The number 1 and anybody? All right, the past tense of win. Won. W-O-N. Yeah, so one. I, wait. Yeah, these are all examples of homophones. These are all words that sound the same. So, for example,
See.
yeah, so for example, if I say, what is your weight? What is your weight? Now, you might be like, oh, I'm not going to answer that question. But for example, what if you're on the bus and the bus is late? Now the question, what is your weight, might be, how many minutes did you wait for the bus?
Wait for the bus. Yeah.
So if somebody says, what is your weight right now? I don't know, 110 pounds? No.
No.
10 minutes, 15 minutes, So again, sometimes we can get confused by those words. It's okay? So that's just a little kind of grammar or kind of a vocabulary point. But again, when they talk about weight, you'll notice it sounds the same as wait, like wait, don't go, wait, right? Okay. So once again, you don't have to tell us your weight. But again, height and weight, again, have to be expressed using American measurements. Okay? Now, finally, eye color and hair color. Notice we have to choose just one. Okay, so again, you can look in the mirror and kind of identify what color your eyes are. So again, you've got lots of interesting choices here on the list. So again, you can use a dictionary if you need any help with these colors. Okay, all right, so the biographic section, again, you probably did something like this for the permanent resident card. So in this case, hopefully it's not going to be too difficult. Okay, do I have any questions about part 7 before we go to the next section? Any questions at all? Okay, all right, very good. All right, let's go ahead and move on then to the next card. Okay, now this particular section does need a little bit more time to talk about. So let's take a few minutes and discuss it. Now, first off, I know many students don't have the chance to work in the United States. So, for example, maybe you don't have the eligibility to work. Maybe you're waiting for Social Security card, whatever. Okay, so I understand that can be a problem if you've not had the chance to work in the United States. Now, we'll talk more about that in a few weeks, because one of the important things I want to say to students today is while you're here in the United States, it's important that you have something to do. Now, for example, if you are maybe volunteering, maybe you volunteer at a particular place, maybe at your children's school, or maybe at the library, or volunteer for some other organization. Maybe you go to church, or you go to a mosque, or you go to some particular religious organization. Those things are very important, okay? Because when you're here in the United States, the interviewer, they want to know, are you here to help America? Are you here to make America a better place? So if you are going to church, or if you're going to school, or if you're working, that's a good thing. But I know some students don't have the chance to work, and that's okay. So one thing I mentioned here in the little yellow box is you can talk about that you go to school at Kenton ESL. Okay, so that is very important, because now it looks like you're here to try to, I want my English to be better. And guys, that's so important. It's so important because they want to see, are you going to be a good citizen? So on this particular part of the test, of the application, it says information about your employment and schools. So keep in mind, Kenton ESL is considered a school for this part of the application. So for example, when you put in the school's name and street address, we have all of that information on our website. Okay, so you can put all of that information here if that is a school that you want to mention on this part of the application. But so we'll get to that in just a moment. But first, I want to go back to the instructions. Okay, now notice what I circled. I circled that part there where it says, let me zoom in so we can see it a little better. Okay, so let's read that first sentence. That first sentence says, list where you have worked, right? Have worked. So that's that present perfect we talked about. List where you have worked or attended school full-time or part-time during the last 5 years. Now remember, many things on the application are for the last 5 years. Okay, so again, right now, if you're getting ready to apply for citizenship, you can put Kenton ESL as one of the schools where you attended. Okay, now again, looking through the rest of the instructions, if you worked in the military, for example, or if you had again studies at different institutions or universities, if you worked for yourself. I've had a couple of students who have their own businesses, who were self-employed, then again, you have to put that information on this part of the application. Okay, now again, I'm not going to talk to each one of you. I'm not going to ask you where you're working right now. But when it comes to questions, if you have filled out this information on the application, they are going to ask you questions about this. So if you were a student, what did you study? If you work at a place, what was your job? What did you do at this place? Okay, so we're going to practice. So notice again, when you fill out the information, there are many sections that you can fill out, and if you need more paper, like if you need more places to put information down, you can use extra paper. So now remember, if you did something all 5 years, if you changed jobs during those 5 years many times, you need to put them all on the application. Okay? All right, now let's take a look specifically at some of the areas they're asking about. For example, this part here. For example, if you were in the military or living in a different place, while you were working during this time. Notice there are places for foreign address. Foreign address means another country. Again, most of the time my students don't have to fill this information out because if they're going to school or working, they're doing it mostly in the United States. Okay, but I want to point out this last part. Okay, look at this last part here. So it says date from, date to. Now remember, they know a lot of this information already. So guys, you're going to have to go back and find all of your paperwork to tell you exactly if you were working. Okay, so for example, if you have a job, when did you start working? And of course, when did you finish? Now, when you fill out the information, of course, you should fill this out in terms of time. So for example, number one should be the job or school you're doing right now, the most recent job or school. So again, if you're going to put Kenton ESL, if you're applying now, maybe Kenton ESL would be number one. Or if you're working right now, you would put your current job on this list. Okay. Now, occupation. Okay. Where it says your occupation, that means what did you do? What was your actual position? So in this case, if you were working at a, say it again, Elaine.
Titles.
One more time.
Titles.
Titles, yes, yeah. If you had a specific title, that's right. Yes. But for example, if some of you worked at Amazon, again, Amazon's a very popular place. You know, maybe you had a specific department. You know, so for example, you know, like I said in my interview, maybe you were packaging at Amazon, for example, or maybe you were a clerk or assistant. You know, there are many different titles you can use, many different explanations of what your occupation could be. Okay. Now, of course, you would only put occupation if you're giving the job, the employer's name. Okay. Obviously, if it's a school, you know, there is no occupation at school. You're a student. Okay. Okay. So again, for this particular part of the application, you'll put in the employer or the school's name, street number. Okay, so again, if you're using Kenton ESL, all of that information is on our website, and then you could put the dates that you attended classes. Or if you're working, you can list those particular places here too. All right? Okay, now before we continue, do I have any specific questions about this part of the application? Because again, this is a pretty important part. It's to show if you've been, you know, doing something, working or going to school. Okay, so do I have any questions about this section? Questions? Any questions? Okay.
No, Mr. John.
Okay. Now, of course, there is another part of the application where you can put other activities. So I mentioned going to church or participating in some organizations. That's for a different part of the application. But for this part of the application, this is, again, your schools and your employment. Okay? All right, so far it seems like we're doing okay when it comes to understanding these parts of the application. Okay.
How about the housewife?
Well, yeah, unfortunately, Elaine, they do not consider that a job. It may be a difficult job, but in this case, that's why, Elaine, I would put, you know, Kenton ESL as the school. I would recommend to everybody in this group, if you can work, if you can, find a job. If you cannot work, my recommendation is try to volunteer. Okay, so that might be something to think about. Volunteer at some organization, whether it's, again, at your church or at your children's school or someplace. Now, I realize with COVID right now, with the quarantine, it's very difficult to volunteer. So, again, I think everyone understands that. So, Elaine, you might want to think about other organizations or volunteer opportunities.
Yeah, in the church. And how about sewing the face mask and sending to the
Well,
hospital.
but was it, yeah, so
And
Elaine, was it for a specific place?
I beg your pardon.
Yeah, Was it for a specific place? Like, did you make masks for a specific hospital or organization?
Well, here, the Connecticut hospital.
Okay, well, what I might recommend is mention, we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. We'll get to that part of the application. But the idea, Elaine, is try to make it sound, like it was more than just a couple of days, So yeah, maybe put the specific hospital or some specific organization. I would recommend being very specific.
Because I
Yeah.
still keep 2 weeks and send the mask to the hospital.
Okay. Well, again, I think anytime we can volunteer for at least a month or 2 months or longer. Again, Elaine, I might recommend that you might want to consider continuing to volunteer in some ways. But that's my recommendation for everybody in this group. Again, church, any sort of organization that you belong to. Again, they want to see in the interview, are you going to be a good citizen? Are you going to help make America a better place? That's what they want to know. So if you're working or if you're going to school or if you're volunteering, that's really what they want to see. Are you trying to make your life better and trying to make America better? Okay?
Understand.
Yeah, so maybe continue making masks or doing some other things. I think that's wonderful. Okay, but we'll talk about that when we get to that part of the interview. Okay, guys, now let's practice some of the questions we see on the screen. So I'm just going to ask some of these questions to some of these people. So for example, Gisela, are you currently working?
Not right now, Mr. John.
Okay, are you going to school?
Yeah, I'm going to the school, ESL, Kenton ESL.
Okay, and how long have you been taking classes there?
I think like 6 months now.
Okay, all right, good. Thanks, Gisela. So that's a good answer. I think that's very good. Okay. Saba, are you currently employed?
No, I'm not.
Okay, are we taking classes or going to school somewhere?
Yes, I'm taking classes in Kenton County. KSL.
What kind of classes are they?
English class course.
Okay. Yes, and you can also mention, Saba, you're taking citizenship classes too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's good. So that's good for
Yeah.
everybody. Okay. Belisario, are you currently working?
No.
Okay. Have you worked in the past in the United States?
Yes.
Yes, you have. Okay. Yeah, so again, remember, all that information will be on the application, right? So be prepared. Can you tell me about one position? What was one job you did? Did you work at a restaurant? Did you work at a grocery store? Did you work at Amazon?
No. In company.
Okay. All right. And so then if they ask you the name of the company and your position, what was your position at the company? What was your occupation?
Product.
Okay.
Producer.
Okay. Okay, so again, you need to be able to explain. Okay, so just remember, if you put a job on the application, you must explain it. Okay, so just be prepared, Belisario. Okay. All right, let's try another question. So for number 2, Olena, are either of your parents U.S. citizens?
No, they aren't.
Okay. Number 3, Elaine, have you been working during the last 5 years?
Last 5 years, yes.
Okay, can you tell me about one of those jobs?
I work in Hong Kong, and that is the sample designer.
Okay. Yeah. Now, of course, obviously, if you're applying as a spouse, that will be different as a permanent resident. So, yeah, generally, it's just in the last 5 years. So when you apply, it'll depend on your situation. Okay. All right. Okay, everybody, how tall are you? All right. So, Gisela, do you remember the answer to that question? How tall are you?
5 feet.
Okay. Saba, how tall are you?
It's and 3 inches.
Say it again.
5 feet. 5 feet and 3 inches.
Okay, very good. All right. Okay, so again, these particular questions, remember, these are the kinds of questions they're going to ask you. And of course, especially for the working. So notice when I asked about the working question, if you didn't work, then I asked you about your school, if you took classes. Now, remember, if I'm the interviewer, I have all of this information in front of me. You have this information on your application. So they're not going to ask you crazy questions. They're going to ask you questions about what you put on the application. Okay? So again, Belisario, if you've worked in the United States, you need to be able to talk about your job. What did you do? Elena, if you get a job and you're working, make sure you know how to explain what the job is. Remember, this is an English test too. So they want to know what was the position if you were working, or if you took classes, what were the classes? What did you study? If you studied English, if you studied something else. So keep in mind for number one, if you've not been working, they might ask you about your school. Okay. Again, number two is just asking about if our parents are citizens. So that's hopefully not a difficult question. Notice number three, I used the present perfect. All right, everybody, turn on your microphones. Let's practice question number three. Let's say it together. So everyone repeat after me. Have you been working during the last 5 years? Everybody, let's try it. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Have you been
Have
working
you been
during the
working
last
That's
5
during
years?
the
5 years.
last 5 years?
Okay, so again, that question, if you notice, is using that present perfect that we talked about in class. Okay, so again, they're going to ask you all of the questions, all of the information on your application. Okay, all right, everybody. Now, one more before we leave. Let's practice these two vocabulary words. So again, everyone say these with me. Ethnicity.
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 Race.
Race.
Okay.
Race.
All right, so those were two words we talked a little bit about this morning. So again, ethnicity is referring to, again, your particular origin, where you came from. So if you notice, again, on the application, I'll go back for just a moment. When they mention ethnicity on the application, it's very simple. Would you put Latino or not Latino? Okay, so that's how they describe it on the application. Now, again, race, often Americans think of race as just our skin color. So in this case, would you put white, Asian, or so on? So again, when they ask about ethnicity or race, that's generally the distinction. But in general, ethnicity is talking about people who share the same customs or religion or origin, whereas race is usually talking about skin color. Okay, so I know that's not perfect. That's not a great way to put information on the application, but that's how they ask the questions during the interview. Okay, and then finally, let's practice these two vocabulary words one more time. Let's say these two words together. Height. Everybody, let's say it. Height.
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 Weight.
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 So remember, we described today that, for example, the words weight is an example of what we call a homophone. Everyone, let's say that together. Homophone.
Homophone.
So remember, homophones are words that sound the same, but are different words.
Different word, yeah.
Yeah, so again, look at the examples of homophones we have here. We have weight and weight, right? I and I, one and one. You probably can think of more, right? For example, here's
Like
C and C. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to put one in the chat box. I think everyone knows this one, right? So this one I put in the chat box. You probably know this one, or you probably know this one, right? Yeah. English has many, many, many homophones. Many of them, probably more than any other language. So that's why English is crazy. English has many of these homophones. Okay, well, guys, that covers sections 6 through 8 for today. Let's return to my presentation before we finish up here this morning. Now, it's important to be prepared, and that's something that I want to remind everybody. Now, you're taking this class because you want to be prepared for the interview. So, of course, you need to practice. You need to practice and prepare to answer all of the questions they give you. So again, with the civics section, the 100 questions, you need to practice them. I hope you're practicing them. I hope you're practicing the reading and the writing. Now, something else you need to remember is that when you come to the interview, you need to bring every required document. So for example, your permanent resident card. If you're married, or if you've ever been divorced, or even if your husband or wife has died, you have to bring all of the documentation to the interview. Okay, so again, you need to find everything. If you can, birth certificate, everything that you can find, passports, anything, you need to bring those required documents to the interview. Now you might say, Mr. John, I don't know if I have all of these documents. Well, I'm going to show you something that will help you here in just a moment. And then finally, make sure you dress appropriately. Make sure you wear the right clothes, okay? So it is not a good idea to go to the interview with a, Mickey Mouse t-shirt, right? And, wearing a Cincinnati Reds baseball hat. That's not a good idea. We want to look very nice. So again, when you watch these videos, you notice the people are wearing appropriate clothes. Okay, so that's very important. We want to look serious. Now, if you say, Mr. John, I don't know if I have all of those documents, I can't remember. Well, the Citizenship Office has produced a checklist. So we're not going to go through the checklist here completely. But what I want to show you is, and I'm going to send this to you in your email, is they give you a list of all of the documents and things you need to have. Okay, they also list what the current fees are, though I think those fees are probably going to go up. I think they're going to become more expensive. And then the particular eligibility, again, are you eligible? Do you meet the requirements? We've talked about this already. Are you a 5-year permanent resident, or you're married 3 years? So again, you can look through the worksheet instructions, but I think you should especially look at the very first 2 pages. The first 2 pages are showing you, and I'll see if I can zoom in just for a moment here, what you need to include with your N400 application. So again, if you notice, you have to produce copies, photocopies of everything. Your permanent resident card, let me zoom in here, also known as the green card, okay? The check or money order for the application fee or the biometric services fee. That's an M479, which is the current naturalization fees, okay? You also have to pay using a credit card, so no cash or check. And then if you live outside of the United States right now, if you reside, you have to send photographs. Now keep in mind that says if you reside outside of the United States. I think everyone here for now probably resides in the United States, but you'll have to send those if you do, okay? So that's the idea. And then if you need more help about those details, you can look at a different form, okay? Now, in terms of this last part, it says send copies of the following documents unless we ask for an original. So again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but you need to go through this entire checklist to see if you are, depending on how you are applying. For example, here, if you're applying for naturalization based on your marriage, so marriage to a U.S. citizen, then you need to make sure you include these 4 things in that application. Okay, so again, this checklist is something that's going to be very helpful for you to make sure you have all of the documents that you need when you apply. So I'm going to email this to you after we're finished here today. And remember, again, it has all of the helpful information to help you fill out the N400 application. Okay, so I'm going to send this to you in your email. Please, 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 when you're ready to start applying. Now keep in mind, they might change some of these things soon, but for now, this is the current document to help you with making sure you have everything you need to apply. Okay, so do I have any questions about the checklist or anything that's listed here?
Don't know yet.
Okay, well, like I said, this document checklist is there to help you. Make sure you have all of the necessary documents you need to apply. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure we mentioned that here today.
Now how much?
Go ahead, Elaine.
Now how much when we apply for citizenship?
Well, again, that the proposed increase was supposed to be, I think, much more, like $1,500 or $1,600. I think it might be more than that. Yeah.
And
So
I just want to know, that we pay that for interview. For example, fail, not pass, and then next time need to pay again.
I don't think you have to pay again. You may have to. I don't know if you have to pay a filing fee, but I don't think they make you require you to pay again. But I can't answer that question.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we can look it up, but I cannot answer that question. Okay. But that's a good question. Okay. So after we're finished here today, I will send you a copy of this checklist in your email, so you can check and see again, what you would need to do. But also, I want to also kind of remind you that we will continue to send some helpful videos to help you get prepared. And so, for example, this week's video that I'm going to send to you is an applicant who is not prepared for the interview. So this is a person who has really not practiced and prepared and maybe doesn't necessarily know everything on their application. So guys, you have to know everything on your application when you go for the interview. Okay? So I will send you that in your email after we're finished here today. All right, guys, do I have any other questions before we finish this morning?